Hey, good morning, everybody. First and foremost, we have to acknowledge two things. Number one, today's shir is always in memory of Avigdor Chai Avram and Mirtzir Rachalea. And let me just go to mute here. And also that today is Yom HaZikaron. It's a difficult day. It's a heavy day. It's a day where there's probably not a single person in this country that doesn't personally know someone who has either been fallen in battle, been affected by a terror attack, as opposed to in the United States Memorial Day, where it's hot dogs and hamburgers and days off of work, and you know, all that stuff. It's a very serious, heavy day. And in that vein, I'd like to also dedicate today's learning to all those whose ultimate sacrifice paved the way for us to be here in this country, whether it was done by choice or not by choice. God forbid, you know, someone was killed in a terror attack. Okay, for those who are listening online, I sent in the group, both in the Tanya group and the Siyat Yesharim group, a picture of the source sheet. When it gets posted on YouTube, it'll be in the comments. And the talk today is called From Anger to Serenity. In full disclosure, I've given this talk once 6 years ago here. So some of it may sound familiar. Some of it, if you have my kind of memory of that, you will say, oh, you spoke here once. And we'll see why, as I get into it, why I chose to talk about this. Not just because the topic that we're dealing with right now in the Siyat Yesharim happens to be about anger, but also as a very specific reason that was the trigger for me to write this, this talk. So let's start from the beginning. You know that in the 10 plagues, the second plague was Tzvardeya. That it says in the Torah, Batal HaTzvardeya, that the Tzvardeya came out of the water and then the whole country was filled with frogs. And Rashi talks about the idea that, why does it say Batal HaTzvardeya, that the frog came out? He said that many of you learned this when you were younger, that when the Egyptians would see a frog, they hit it and it split into two, and those two split into four, those split, etc. So you would think if you happen to do that 2, 3, 4, 5 times, you'd realize that there was a pattern. And what would you do is you stop hitting the frogs and then they wouldn't multiply. But when they were hitting them, why were they hitting? They're hitting them out of anger. And that anger causes us to do things that are absolutely illogical and go very often against what we even believe. So I'll tell you a story. Some of you heard this story already. It's a true story. And this is what changed my life, actually, in one area. It had to do with anger. If we go back to April 13th, 1998, I would say that before that time period, I had a relatively short fuse. Didn't mean I was running around screaming and yelling, but I would get angry pretty easily. I'd get riled up. And my biggest trigger was, for anger, was traffic. Driving and someone cutting me off. Person not moving fast enough in front of me. All those things would really get to me because, after all, I owned the road. And I would be pretty good at what I did very often was, if someone cut me off, then I would speed around them and I hit my brakes. And that I did a lot. And often you would see the face of the person behind me in the rearview mirror, and it gave me a lot of satisfaction. I felt good about it. And then April 13th, 1998 happened. I was sitting at a red light, and up next to me in the lane next to me, I'm watching in my rearview mirror 2 guys jockeying for position, one in front of the other, doing exactly what I was doing. But I was sitting there watching. And they came to the stop at the red light next to me. And the guy in the car behind got out of his car, he had a tire iron or some metal thing in his hand. He opened the door of the first guy, and I said, oh my God, he's going to kill him right in front of my eyes. Thankfully, the guy in the first car had the brains to go through the red light. And I said to myself, Ad Khan, that's it. If I get somewhere 2 minutes later, my kids will still have a father. My wife will still have a husband. My parents will have a child. Because where I was going, and like one of these aha moments in my life, and we've all had something like that at some point in our lives, I had that aha moment that, okay, that's me. That's me getting the tire iron busted against my head. God forbid. And that was it. And I said, I made this decision at that moment to change my life. But there was something that happened just before that I think really supports my my description of how I was dealing with anger or not dealing with anger. This story may sound familiar to some of you as well. I was driving down the street on a 40-mile-an-hour road, and a 4-lane road, 2 lanes each direction. And a car crossed the 4 lanes from one side street to another, and he came right in front of me. And in order to not hit him, I had to hit my brakes so hard, everything that was in the back seat went flying. Something hit me in the head, no. And then he continued down the side street, and I wasn't about to let him get away. And I hit my brakes, looked in my rearview mirror, and saw it was a main street. No one was behind me. I put it in reverse. I went backwards about a block, went down the side street, and where, let's say, it would be a 25-mile-an-hour, 30-mile-an-hour speed zone, I was up to 50, trying to find him. I went after him. By the way, the first time I told the story in public in Chicago, my parents were in the audience. First time they ever heard that story. My mom was really not happy. Yeah. So I went after the car. I got to the intersection. I passed him. I spun around like with screeching because I wanted to make it more dramatic. And then I went head on at him. Literally head on. I got as close as to almost being at his front bumper. And I'm saying out loud, I couldn't control myself at that point. I mean, literally could not control myself. I said out loud, "What are you doing? What are you going? You're going to get killed." But I didn't care. Honestly, I didn't care. A part of me said, if I go out, I'm going out in a blaze of glory because I got him. You realize how sick that sounds, how twisted that is. And the end result is I went around him and I screamed at him, probably not words I would repeat, at least not on YouTube or Zoom. And I took off, and then my heart's going like, and that wasn't that long before the encounter I had or witnessed a short period later on April 13th, 1998, when I, like say, almost saw someone kill somebody over this. And I said, that's it. And I had to change my life. What are some of the things that get us angry? Give me some examples. Get out of my way, right? You're in my way. Why is this line not moving? I don't get it. I'm trying to download. It's not coming in on my phone. What's wrong with this? And I used to go to the library, get on a bus, go to the library, and look something up. It took you an hour to get there and back, but you don't have it in 3 nanoseconds. You're upset about it. What are you, stupid? You don't get what I'm trying to explain to you? Can't you conceive of what's wrong with you? These are the kind of things that we hear. And by the way, for many people, it's the little things that get you crazy. It's not so much the big things. I'm going to read something now in source number 1. And for those who came in after us, this source that's on the table. For those listening online, you'll see it on your phones. This is the quote of what we learned last week in Mesilat Yesharim. I'm going to read it and explain to you. I said I tipped my hand. And I said that there was one word that got me to write this speech. And you're going to see what that is today. So I'm going to read it. For some of you, it's rereading. Some of it's just hearing for the first time. It's a quote from Mesilat Yesharim, last week's few paragraphs we read. Just one. Nidaber ata mina ka'as. I'm going to now speak about ka'as, said the Ramchal. There's this kind of individual who's such an angry individual. They say about him, that a person like that who gets so angry is as if he's worshiping idols. And it's a person who gets angry about anything that happens that goes against his will. And he gets filled with this anger to the point where his heart's no longer even with him, and he's out of his mind. For that kind of a person, he'd be willing to see the whole world burn down, so to speak. His common sense doesn't help him at all at that moment. This is me. I mean, that was me in that story of chasing this guy down the side street. No question. I was learning this with the chavruta. I was actually teaching somebody, whatever, in a chavruta situation, and I stopped. And I kind of sat there thinking. And my chavruta, after a few minutes, says, "Are you okay?" I said, yeah, because something just popped into my head. And I don't know if everyone has a different way they process things. For me, when I get an idea, I try and stop and I write something in my head, and it, so to speak. And I maybe jot down notes and it said, this leads to this. So I almost wrote a speech in my head while I was sitting there. It was based on one word. Look at it again. Look at line number 2, where it says, Vahu hanichas. It's the kind of person who gets angered. Kol davar shi'asu, that anything that is done neged ritzono, anything that is done that is against his will. And that's the beginning of the key of this entire talk. When we are more concerned about ritzono, meaning my ratzon, what I want, what I need, and how I see this world is supposed to go, and not what is Hashem's ratzon, and not what I see as God's ratzon and desire for what happens in this world, I have completely missed the boat. And we begin a downward spiral. Anger prevents us from doing the ratzon Hashem. When you miss a bus, this is one of the ones I always come to. You miss a bus, or you can't find the parking place, or the ticket you wanted to order didn't arrive, or the book didn't arrive, or they got your order wrong at the restaurant. Every single solitary thing that happened is Ratzon Hashem. But when you look at it from your perspective, that they didn't do Ritzoncha, they didn't do your will, and you get angry because of that, then you've already started this disconnect with Hashem. I'll give you some examples and how we'll see about that. It also prevents us from doing a mitzvah, or I'm doing a mitzvah properly. And if Kaas is the root of not doing mitzvot properly, therefore, how we can control it and how we can remain serene or attain some level of serenity, that will help us turn things around. Now, it is almost impossible to completely change a character trait. We know that. We talked about this in the beginning of Sefer Mesilat Yesharim. We talked about the Ramchal, we talked about Rambam, that it's Ramchal, one of them said it's easier basically to learn all of Shas by heart than to change a character trait. Full disclosure, when I have a car and I'm driving, I don't do anything about it, but I'm very well aware of my triggers. Someone cuts me off, I will tell you there is this instant feeling of, I'm going after it, and no, I literally will take my foot off the gas. I take my foot off the gas because I know that that's a big trigger for me. So what we first have to do is let's first understand what are the hashlachot, or what are the effects of anger. What does it cause us to do? So sometimes it's obvious, right? It causes animosity between people, between parent, child, between spouse, between neighbors, between friends, teacher, student. Those are the obvious things. But I'm going to read to you 1, 2, 3, 4 statements that are made in various places. And I'll explain. They're not on your sheet. We just read one of them, which is Kol ha'ko'es ki'ilu oved avodah zarah. It's actually based in Gemara on Shabbat. Whoever gets angry, I'm not talking about angry. I'm talking about really angry. It goes crazy angry. Is ki'ilu is as if he worshipped idols. We're going to come back to each one of these statements. Number 2, Kol ha'ko'es, person who gets very angry. Im chacham hu chochmato mistaleket mimeno. If he's wise, his chochma leaves. He loses that ability to have that wisdom, at least temporarily. Number 3, Kol ha'ko'es titchalef nishmato leneshama acheret. So one's a little more esoteric. It's from Shar HaGilgulim, from the Arizal, that a person who gets angry, that their neshama is changed to a different neshama. And the last statement, Kol ha'ko'es kol minei gehinom sholtin bo. Person who gets very angry, all means or types of hell will rule over him. So we need to understand these statements. What does it mean that a person is ki'ilu oved avodah zarah? They get very angry. So obviously it doesn't mean they are. It says ki'ilu. That he has the capacity because he's so out of his mind. By the way, I'm using the generic case, sorry. He's so out of his mind at that moment that he has no shlita. He has no rule over himself. And when he has no rule over himself, means he doesn't recognize rule over him in any capacity, including God. And if that's the case, then he can also worship idols, in theory. That's what it means, ki'ilu. You've lost that control. How do we know that a person's chokhmah, their wisdom, leaves them if they get very angry? So there's a midrash that tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu got angry on 3 occasions. And because of that anger, he didn't know the halacha. This is Moshe Rabbeinu. It's not me. It's not some guy down the street. It's Moshe Rabbeinu. the one Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai, who himself got the entire Torah Shebal Peh, Torah Shebichtav, and according to the Gemara, everything down to the Mishnah Berurah of today, he learned with God. And yet he forgot halachot because of anger. Number 3, what does it mean? You have your neshama becomes a different neshama. If I had a lot of time, I'd spend a lot of time on this, but I don't, so I'm not going to. Just take it for granted. Take it from me that it basically means that the composition of your neshama changes. The final one, the Kol Minei Gehinom Sholtin Alav, that all different types of hell, of Gehenna, rule over him. Again, what does that mean? Because a person gets angry enough to do other averot, they go down this downward spiral and end up in a place that needs to be buried with a fan and shorts. Okay? Yeah. I actually had a friend who told me, in Shalavim, he says, when I die, please tell them to bury me in shorts and put a fan in there. So he had a very positive outlook on life, let's say. Okay. We understand, I mean, I could spend a lot of time on that, but we can understand the severity of anger just from these little vignettes and these statements. It becomes kind of clear what this really means, what anger does to us. Very nice. I had a sign in my wall in the shul in Chicago I was there for 10 years in the shul. I think about 9 of the years I had it hanging. It said on it, no excuses, just results. If someone comes to you, right, as an accountant, you call up a client and you say, look, I couldn't get it filed on time. We have to file for an extension, whatever it might be. I'm sure that's never happened in your life, okay? But the guy says, you're going to get fines. No, it's okay. We're going to cover it, whatever it's going to be. He doesn't want to hear your excuse at that moment to why you couldn't file on time. He just wants results. He wants his tax return done. Mm-hmm. And that's true in life. I try to live by that. And if someone comes to me, they have a problem, I say, look, I don't want to hear about why. Fix it. I'm pretty sure I told a story here about when I was working with in the business world about the key cutting machines and the computer stuff. I told us, yeah, it was like, whatever. I'm not going to say it again then. But there are people don't want to hear your excuses. They want results. So here's the excuse. The excuse is, I'm angry. I got angry. This is what happened. The severity of it we understand now. Great. Okay. I don't want to hear about that. I want to give me results. How would you fix that? How do you work on anger? So we know that there are things of anger management workshops and things you can read, and there's meditation. There's all kinds of things you can do proactively. So what I'd like to do is to first highlight a few more things about what anger does, how we work with it, and how we can hopefully overcome it and move not just to parv. It's not enough to not be angry. We have to have a sense of serenity or shabbat in life, because not being angry is not a positive necessarily. It's like, I didn't get angry this minute. Great, okay. But does that mean, how does it affect me as far as a positive aspect? It's not necessarily a positive, it's just it's not negative. It's parv.
So
yeah.
Talking about rage more than anger,
yes, right? It is much more, the word really is rage, but even lower level of anger. That's the goal is to, okay, there's actually 2 opinions in this whole idea of anger, rage, etc. On the one hand, you have the Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto in Mesilat Yesharim. No level of anger is good. Nikuda. Shouldn't get angry. Period. On the other hand, you have the Rambam who says that you cannot be a person like the first who's insanely crazed, but you also should not be a person that everything rolls off of them and never respond. You're supposed to respond. As a matter of fact, you're supposed to respond in kind. If someone does hurt you with anger, okay, he has a little bit on that. So to achieve true serenity, it really means eradicating as much anger as possible. The topic here, or the examples, fall more in the category of rage, but the results very often can be on a smaller scale when it comes to any form of anger. Okay, very good point. So I want to take a look at the number 2, and I mentioned this last week in our class, the Ramban in the Igeret HaRamban. And I said that's a relatively short treatise that he wrote to his son about how to be a mensch, how to be a good person, how to live your life. And he told him he's supposed to read it every day. And of all the things he talks about, listen to this. Number 2, Shema b'ni musar ravicha v'al titosh Torah timecha. That's the opening line, a quote from Mishlei. Titnaheg tamid ledaber kol dvarecha benachat. When you talk to people, talk nicely. L'chol adam u'v'chol et. to everybody. Doesn't say to your boss, to your spouse, to everybody, and at all times. This is the very first topic in this very short amount of information he sends his son. And by doing so, you will save yourself from anger. Because it is a terrible character trait that causes people to sin. Second to last line, and when you say you're saved from anger, what does it lead to? It leads to being a feeling of humility. Because it's the greatest of all midot tovot. Of all the good character traits you can have, humility, he says, is the best. So we start off by hearing from the Ramban, that one of the things that a person, if not the very first thing they need to work on when they want to change themselves, is anger. Because not only is it a bad character trait, it affects that individual immensely and very deeply. Now, take a look at number 3. This is Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, the father of the Musar movement, writes as follows. B'divrei HaTana be'avot, regarding the words of the Tana in Pirkei Avot, where it says, Hem amru shlosha devarim, they said 3 things. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Yehi chavod chavercha chaviv alecha kishelcha. Remember, he says, I'm going to tell you 3 things about how to comport yourself in life. Number 1, your friend's honor should be as important to you as your own. Number 2, al tihi noach lichos, don't be quick to anger. Number 3, shuva chad lifnei yom mitatcha, do tshuva one day before you die. And number 4 out of 3, havei mitchamim keneged oran shel chachamim, and warm yourself by the light of chachamim. So they say, I'm going to tell you 3 things, and he tells us 4, right? 4 things. If you pay attention to what you just read, he says, you will notice that there are 4 things, not 3 things. So why does the Tana say, I'm going to tell you 3 things? It's like, not in the same thing, but when David HaMelech says, I'm going to ask just one thing. He asked for a whole laundry list. That's your homework. You do your on your own. Next paragraph. He says the 2 statements. The one statement that says, be slow to anger. And number 2, do tshuva the day before you die, is really one statement. How? Now this is the quote from Yisrael Salanter. And the moment a person gets angry, a person's holy neshama leaves them. The and therefore kaas, anger, is like a form of death. And a person therefore has to do tshuva before they come to this point of anger. So he's telling us here that the anger, when a person gets angry, this is even more than anything we've seen before than all these other statements. It's it's a form of death. They said like sleep is a 60th of death. Other things are like a ki'ilu person's passed away. Obviously, the neshama doesn't leave the individual when he gets angry in the literal sense, because the person wouldn't be alive. But he says it's a ki'ilu, as if the neshama left them. And therefore, it also tells us what is the effect on us personal. By the way, I'm not even mentioning, and I'm sure you all know, that what anger does to us physiologically, blood pressure, heart, mind, our overall physical well-being, our mental health is a tremendous stressor. Things that we have that cause ourselves to be in poor health sometimes. Probably the most important tool for anybody when it comes to dealing with anger is knowing what the triggers are, what cause us to be. Now, for example, if a person's in a therapy or going through some form of counseling for some form of addiction. So one of the things that's important, besides understanding that they have the problem and everything else, is what are the triggers that lead to the addiction, and therefore what do you do to avoid those triggers? The same thing is true when it comes to anger. One of the biggest, most wonderful things a person can do is to accept that the Ratzon Hashem is what is meant to be. And that goes a great long way for us to be calm. I'm going to read a sentence to you. I don't know if I thought of this myself or I heard it somewhere, but it's a powerful statement. So I won't take credit for it. I probably heard it somewhere. That which is going on around you is Betzon Hashem. What happens around you is the will of God. How you react to that is up to you. That's your choice. The fact that you missed that bus, that you didn't finish something on time, the fact that, maybe that's your choice, the fact that you didn't get the job you want, the fact that you didn't fill in the blank, that's happening to you. That's what's on Hashem. That's God's will. How you react to that, what you do with it, that's up to you. Pirkei Avot says, "Aseh retzono kirtzoncha." Sorry, yes, make his will your will. When you do that and you say, I didn't get the job, Baruch Hashem, I didn't get the job. It was not for me, but it was the best job I could have ever. It's my dream job. It's not the right thing for you. Where this is hard to accept, where this is very difficult to accept, has to do with illness. It has to do with shidduchim, has to do with parnasa, all those areas. You know, when a person says, it's very hard to tell someone who doesn't have a mate, it's Hashem's will that you don't have someone yet. Your person's out there, it's not the right person, not at the right time. It's very hard to accept that. I know that, I understand that. But take away for a moment those very difficult cases, take your daily things. By the way, we encounter things constantly that don't go the way we planned. And again, it's something as simple as you go to the store to buy a can of beets. They come in cans, I don't know. A package of fresh made beets, or not fresh, the cooked and prepared beets in the plastic, vacuum packed. I know something. I know caterers, so you know. And they're out of stock. But you needed it for the thing you're cooking tonight. It's on Hashem. Ad kedei kach, to such an extent. For those of you who have heard of Rebbetzin Shira Smiles, I know some of you have heard of her, magnificent woman, magnificent speaker. And one day I'll tell you an amazing story between the two of us. She is a here. She tells a story about when she talks about this topic, not anger, but about Ritzon Hashem, the will of God, is about going to the store to buy a can of mushrooms. I don't like mushrooms. I told you what time someone called me once and asked me what bracha you make on mushrooms. I tell you this. I said, you make a baruch dayan emet. Someone actually asked me one time, I told her, I said, I have a great recipe for mushrooms. You chop it up real fine and go like that and put it in the garbage. Sorry, I just don't like mushrooms. Neither does Andy. Anyhow, where was I? So she talks about you come to the store and the can of mushrooms is not on the shelf. Or the opposite. You were coming in just for the mushrooms and you walked in, it was right there in front of you. That's Hashem helping you. Hashem wants you to be at that moment to be able to get that. Why in the world, if you think a little bit, now we can't try to understand God, but why in the world should it be, but Hashem, if you didn't want me to have those beats, why? I'm going to ask everyone to make sure you're muted. There we go. Why is that? It's not so much necessarily about the beats. What happens when you don't find those beats there, but you need them? Now what happens?
Take mushrooms.
Chas v'shalom. Or it's no, you need the beets. It's for a recipe you have to have. Now what are you going to do?
You explore other ways to find beets.
Right. So you got to go somewhere else. So now what happens is that you. So what happens? You have to go somewhere else. Maybe it's not about the beets. You're going to see somebody who Hashem wants you to talk to for some reason. You need an encounter. Or story I don't think I've told here. I hope. I don't like telling the same thing 23 times. 22 is my limit. When my oldest daughter, Daniela, was about 10, I don't remember how old she was. They're living in Chicago. And Chicago basically is flat. And it's in the Jewish areas in three main neighborhoods. You have Lincolnwood-Peterson Park, West Rogers Park, and Skokie over there. So Lincolnwood-Peterson Park and West Rogers Park are separated with the Chicago River. Tributary of the Chicago River, and a little bridge. That's the big mountain in Chicago. It's about like that. And I made up with Daniela's friend, and she was about, I don't remember, again, 10 or 11 years old, that her mother, on the Shabbat, that the mother of one of her friends was going to walk this friend to the edge of the bridge, watch her cross, and I would pick her up like after the bridge at was standing literally inside of a Trafe restaurant where I was going to meet her. But that's where we met up. And I was going to meet you at 3:30. It's 3:30, it's 3:35, it's 3:40. Nada, nothing. I said to Danielle, let's go. I can't stand here all day. As those words are coming out of my mouth, an elderly couple or a Chinese woman, you can't say that, I don't know. She, who knows what you can say anymore, was tripped right in front of me and I caught her. I mean, and she was one of these really skinny, frail, older individuals who she would fall to the pavement. There's no question she'd been in the hospital. And I said to Daniela, that's why your friend is late. She understood. Now, again, it's not about the beats not being on the shelf. It's about what causes the chain effect or chain reaction to everything else that happens because those beats weren't there. That's when we see, that's the Ratzon Hashem. My will was to have those stupid beats. Why didn't I get that? Look at the source number 1 again. That when I get against my Ratzon, man, I got to schlep out. I got to go from the Kohen, and I got to go to here, and I got to go to 11. Maybe this one hadn't. No, it was meant to be. That's how it is. What you do with what happens to you is up to you. And when you recognize that it's Ratzon Hashem, that's a big deal. But perhaps one of the greatest triggers of anger, I want to take a guess what is a big trigger for anger.
My phone.
Your phone? You can say it.
No.
Don't say it. And I can think everyone here can relate to this in one way or another.
Yeah.
Family can be a very big trigger, of course. Time. Time is a huge trigger for a lot of people. When you're under a deadline, when you have to be somewhere at a certain time, when you have to, you're in traffic and you're running late, you're in line at a store and you're still waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And you get into it's the shortest line. It's an express lane. There's only one person with one item in front of you. For some reason, they need a price check, and the guy that needs to check it is not there. And then they need to go downloading, waiting and waiting and waiting and wait. Oh my God, it's now 3 seconds. You're in shul. It's taking an extra 14 seconds to get to Yishtabach. This is horrible. But where it's most bolet, where it's most pronounced, Erev Shabbat. I don't care if you live in London and Shabbat comes in June at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night, or you live somewhere where Shabbat comes in at 3:15 in the afternoon, like in the Sinai desert in the winter, which it does. No matter when it comes in, there are people who will not be ready until you have to be ready. It's the last millisecond of the nanosecond. But why is that? Why is Shabbat or Erev Shabbat? I'm sure all your homes, Erev Shabbat, are a sign of peace and tranquility, where by 9 o'clock in the morning, the table's set, the food is cooked, and you're just sitting there waiting for the Shabbat Malkut time. I know. Almost every Jewish home is like that, except all of them. So why? Why Erev Shabbat? Is there that stressor of time? Yes, because we know Shabbat is coming. But it happens every week. Every week is the same thing. Now, to be honest, our home, Baruch Hashem, is relatively calm. It really is. Because the girls aren't in the house anymore.
And Andy is in charge.
And Andy's in charge, Baruch Hashem. Thank God. Yes. What's that? It's a conspiracy. Yes, the grassy knoll, right? So let's understand, why is it that Erev Shabbat is such a bolet, or such a pronounced moment in time where time becomes the enemy and time really causes anger. Take a look at source number 5, please. Source number 4. Sorry, source number 4 at the bottom of the page. We say this in the Chadodi. By the way, it's a parenthetical statement. If I were to ask you, what is the Chadodi? It's a piyut. What is the Chadodi about? Everyone would say Shabbat. But when you take a look at it, there's only a little bit about Shabbat. A little bit. The rest is all about the Beit HaMikdash and Yerushalayim. So that's also your homework. Wait a minute. Why are we singing that? Another little factoid. Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbat. Nothing to do with Shabbat. Doesn't mention Shabbat anywhere else. It's not about Shabbat at all. It seems. Another piece of homework. You got a lot of work to do before next class. I'm not even going to tell you the answers, by the way. Anyways, number 4. Likrat Shabbat lechuven elecha But let's go and greet the Shabbat. Ki hi mekor haberacha. The source of our bracha for every single week is what happens to us on Shabbat and how we keep and deal with Shabbat. Shabbat is the source of bracha. Let's take a look at what he says here. This is a quote from I quoted from the Da'at website. If you're not familiar from Michael Herzog, it is absolutely magnificent. Let's take. This is in the. I have to remember the who. It's a quote from one of the Rabbanim from Da'at and the website from Michael Herzog. I don't remember who said it. I just quoted it from the source, from the site. We have a general rule. That is that the more something is important, the more the Satan tries to mess it up. Right? If I wanted to leave, when I leave here today, if I wanted to walk to go get my mail, it's not the most important part of my day. It's not like the Satan's going to hopefully make me trip or forget my keys, unless there's a reason long term that Hashem wants that. But if I'm trying to write something and I can't get the words out, it's a very important thing I have to write, and I'm distracted if someone called, something gets involved, which also means, therefore, that Erev Shabbat, the Satan's very involved because he knows that Shabbat coming, that Shabbat is going to be the source of bracha. Satan wants to prevent that. Look inside, please. Number 4. This pasuk, the sentence, explains or describes the unique status of Shabbat. That the Shabbat was zocha for a bracha from God himself. And the piyut, what it does is it describes for us that it is the keren, the horn, the source of shefa bracha, of abundant blessings for the days of the week that follow. Second side, Midrash metzayin et bracha b'Shabbat keshefa gashmi. The Midrash describes the idea of bracha that it's referring to as physical bracha. Birkat Hashem hi ta'ashir, hakavana l'Shabbat. What does that mean? We're talking about, okay, I'm going to get bracha because I keep Shabbat. Wow, that's great. I'm going to get an extra part in Gan Eden. Shkoyach. We're not supposed to work for Gan Eden. Who cares? Not talking about that. Parnasa, tranquility, happiness, things, stuff, all that is a result of Shabbat. V'chein in second line. Furthermore, habracha b'Shabbat hi b'yayin b'levush b'ner u'or panav shel adam. The bracha of Shabbat comes through making kiddush, dressing nice for Shabbat, lighting Shabbat candles, and also or panav shel adam. What does that mean? The light of the person's face. There are people who go through Shabbat and it's 18 hours till it's over. Oh my God, it's the longest day of my life. Or, yes, we have 18 more hours to go. I don't know if people say that, but especially in the summertime up in far north countries. I'm sure you all recognize a type of individual, and there's plenty, maybe more than less, that will sit towards the end of a long Shabbat just looking at their watch. It's the slowest watch movement of the year or the week, right? The 33 minutes till Shabbat's over. Oh my God, now it's 32 and a half minutes only. That's the Or Panav Shel Adam, is how they relate to Shabbat. So it also mentions here a spiritual aspect of Shabbat, how a person relates to Shabbat. It seems that this piyut, meaning the Chadodi, follows in the footsteps of the Zohar, where it says, listen to what I underline. Kol habrachot shelamala v'shelamata biyom hashvi'i tluyot. If you remember nothing from today, and you don't change anything about anger, you don't change anything about how you relate to Hashem as far as Ratzon Hashem, don't forget this sentence. I'm going to read it again and translate. Kol habrachot, every single blessing that we have in this world, shelamala v'shelamata, whether it's spiritual, physical, Bayom HaShvi'i Tluyot, they are reliant, they depend on Shabbat. How we relate to Shabbat, how we keep Shabbat. In Parshat Yitro it says, Kol habrachot shelamala v'shelamata tluyim b'yom hashvi'i, lefi shoto yom mimenu mitbarchim kol sheshet hayamim elyonim. I'm not going to read the rest. He says basically that, and for those of you learning Tanya, you'll know we talked about the similar idea that a person's doing of mitzvot acts as a form of mazon or sustenance to the neshama. So he says here that how we keep Shabbat is what gives us sustenance to increase the amount of bracha we get. If I said to you, if you come to my house tomorrow, I'll give you 100 shekel just for showing up. I imagine some of you would show up. If I said to you, I'll give you 10,000 shekel if you show up tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I'm going to have a line out my door. Why? It's free money. We're giving it away. This is free brachot. But it's not from me. It's from God. Hashem's giving away free brachot. Here's where you sign up. You sign up by keeping Shabbat a little bit better than you do. And it doesn't mean you twist tie, you have to open the cans before Shabbat. That's important. The technical aspects of Shabbat are important. But if you only keep Shabbat from a technical aspect, you're not keeping Shabbat. You're being afraid to break Shabbat. That's all it really means. What does it mean, lishmor et Shabbat? It means to anticipate Shabbat coming. I used to have someone, I don't do it anymore for many years, but there was someone I used to text every few days. I would say it's only 18 hours till Shabbat. It's only 20 hours. I walk into the house. I don't always say this. When I come back from Marav Latzash, I almost always think to myself, if I don't say it out loud, only 144 hours till Shabbat. Because it's always 144 hours from the end of Shabbat to the next Shabbat starting. It's a mindset. Doesn't mean I sit there anticipating it every single day, although we should. Why do we say Hayom Yom? When you say Rishon, I say Yachad b'Shabbat, right? Kodesh. Why do we say that? Because every day we're anticipating the idea of Shabbat, with the Shabbat that went and the Shabbat that's coming up. Which is also why you can make Havdalah until Tuesday morning, because it's still connected to the Shabbat before. Only on the Bori Priya Geffen, not anything else of it. So what do we do? So it's nice to know that Shabbat is what is influencing our brachot, but that's great. How do I deal with it? It's Friday afternoon. This isn't done. That's not done. I have to still do that. We have to be aware of the tone in our house, and we have to be aware of the tune in our house. The tone being, because that's what become triggers. The tone can be, okay, we have a lot to do. We're going to get it done. The tune is, are we doing it out of joy? Or is this a drudgery? This is difficult. And why do we have to do this all the time? How we prepare by preparing differently. How do we change our approach to Shabbat? And you may walk out of here and say, okay, this Shabbat, I'm going to try to do something differently. That's great, but it's wonderful. And then may affect that Friday feel of potential anger and upsetness, if there's such a word, upsetiosity. But if the whole point in any of this, when we're learning from the Ramchal, we're learning from the Rambam or from Ramban and Mesiyat Yesharim, or you learn it from Tanya, you learn it from just learning Navi, or wherever you're learning from, is a matter of kind of carrying it forward, not just a one-off. And doesn't necessarily mean you're going to sustain it. How you feel the day after Yom Kippur is not how you feel more than likely today. I'm almost willing to bet everything I own on that. It takes a very special person to be able to carry the feeling of post-Yom Kippur to the middle of Nisan, Iyar, and Sivan. But it means rethinking how you, quote, make Shabbat. I had a line, again, I don't know, it's mine. It's kind of a take-up on what Achadam said, which is that we don't make Shabbat, but Shabbat makes us. You know, I have to go and make Shabbat. But I say to people, Shabbat really is making you. And that's what this is. It's making you a different person in how you do things and how you're able to then receive brachot. Imagine for a moment, again, going back to this money mashal, that you come to the house, to the money, and you stand there like this, your arms crossed. You know, I said, okay, I want to give you the money. You stand there with your arms crossed. Here's your money. You're here. You're ready for it. No, arms crossed. I can't take it. Right? So when we have these brachot that Hashem is ready to give to us, and we just cross our arms, meaning we don't keep Shabbat properly. I don't mean halachically. Talking about our perspective and getting the anger getting in the way and preparing, then we're pushing away those brachot, almost physically pushing away. We also have to start to internalize that when we perceive and to understand that what happens around us is what's on Hashem. That's a number one thing too. So I have two number one things here. they're both most important. Understanding the trigger of time, and especially Erev Shabbat. And number two, that what happens around us, what happens to us, we cannot change. We can only change what we do with that information or with that event. Instead of viewing it as ritzoni, my will and my desire. You're supposed to have a desire. Like if you didn't, you'd be sitting there all day just, drooling and staring at a wall, right? You have to have desires and needs that you want to fulfill. But you also have to understand that that's, as I heard a great shir one time, that's your plan A. But Hashem has a plan B that really becomes your plan A. Your plan B is Hashem's plan A. And we have to accept that. We have to move that and just understand that. And the last idea here to share for another minute is another key to this, to resolving this whole from anger to serenity concept is ahava, love. We mentioned this last night in Tanya, that when we say ve'ahavtat Hashem Elokecha, what does that mean? What is it we're saying? That you have to have a feeling. I know we know the words, the translation is love. I love my wife, I love my kids. We say love of Hashem. It doesn't mean I want to do Hashem's will. It doesn't mean Hashem is great. It doesn't mean that I want to live by the Torah. That's not what that means. It means I love Hashem. In the simplest term, I have a feeling of love for Hashem. When I feel a sense of love to Hashem, then that permeates everything in me. It then leads to Ahavat Yisrael. When it leads to Ahavat Yisrael and the love of my fellow Jew, then how is it that I can get, even if I get upset with somebody, I want to patch it up because I love that person. So Ahavat Hashem leads to Ahavat Yisrael, which leads to definitely a level of some form of serenity, if not a lot more serenity. Or if a person does get angry, and hopefully not raging, that they'll be able to find a pretty fast way to get back to where they were before that anger. Al tihi noach lichos, as it said in the Pirkei Avot, and quoted, don't be so quick to anger. But at the same time, the next thing he says is that if you do get angry, you should be very easy to be pacified. Get angry. It's okay. You're allowed to have the human emotion of anger, because if you don't, and you stuff the anger, every psychologist is going to tell you, and every therapist is going to tell you that at some point it's going to come out. It's going to come out in the wrong way. I'll give you an example of this. I'm going to close with this. I've had a situation a few times in school where I'm with a principal and a student, or his mechanech and a student, and the kid is causing problems, all kinds of problems. And I say, oh, and I do this. I never tell the mechanech I'm going to do this, and for sure not the student. I say, oh, I'll be right back. I leave the room. I go and buy what I call pop. You call soda. Learn English. Anyways, so sorry. So I go out and I buy a can of pop, and I come back in the room and I sit down. I go like this. I shake it up and I give them, oh, do me a favor. Could you open that for me? The kid always goes, no. I said, why not? Said, well, it'll explode. I said, why? He said, well, you've been shaking it up. I said, I'm looking at it. I don't see anything different. He says, yeah, but inside it's like going crazy. I said, you open that up, it's going to explode. I said, exactly. And that's what we're trying to tell you as a student. You come in here with all these angry feelings and and only someone looked at you, didn't give you the pencil you asked for, boom, you explode. And they always get it. They understand the mashal because it's a visual. It's a great visual. First time I did it, I had no idea I was going to do it. I just came to my head. I've done it like 4 or 5 times. In any case, last thing here, we have tremendous benefits we can get from changing our approach to anger. Most people who have anger management issues, most people can do something about it to turn that flame down. Most. Some may not be able to. But what helps is understanding not only what triggers you, but also what are the benefits of quenching that anger. When you realize that, you want to come, and it's as foolish it is to come to my house, not to come and get the money I'm offering everyone 10,000 shekel will show up just to show up. I'm not. It's just an example. No one's showing up at my house tomorrow, Mark. Okay, thank you.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I know you didn't. That it's just as foolish to not want to be the recipient of Hashem's brachot. If you try to move from anger to serenity, you may not get the whole way. You may get there sometimes and go back to the anger. But the purpose, the goal is the journey, trying, making that effort to change something about you that you really can work on, and makes not just a difference in who you are, but what you receive and all people around you, what they receive as well. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Okay, you can keep the sheets if you want. You can just leave them on the table. I have. What is it?
Same thing about you discussed.
Ah.
The movement